Aha, successfully recorded the meeting. That shouldn't be a hard thing, but it is. So welcome all to our second areas of focus work group. We had kind of talked last time, just to do a recap of, we think the easiest place to kind of start is figure out the categories. And we already have problem types, so we kind of figured, let's build off of that. So we kind of had a draft thing of, towards the bottom of the doc, kind of looking at the problem types and trying to fit them in, see which ones kind of apply here. Summarizing some of the discussion, we agreed all the sauce account stuff should just be its own area. It's the easiest iteration on that one, just because they're not as simple to kind of group. So I think like the main thing we should kind of try to focus on for this is, let's try to get that finalized. Those basically are starting areas. And then the question I'm kind of posing is, once we have our finalized areas, where do we go from there? Do we think new Zendesk drop down and just start kind of trying to categorize every ticket? Maybe make views using these categories? What do y'all think?
I mean, I think getting the Zendesk form set up would be the first part. Like, making a whole bunch of views at this point seems premature, because that requires some more reorganization of the team and the way that we work. Like, focusing, if we expose stuff, folks that are interested can set up their own personal views quite easily. So that's what I can say. Expose first, and then we can work on team stuff.
Is there an opportunity to, based on the categorizations, go back X number of hours, days, months to collect what would fit into those and understand kind of volume, so that we can say, when I think about it as, skills-based routing, right? So but skills-based routing kind of requires a bit of distribution, even distribution, so you can understand what your staffing needs to look like, how much time needs to be spent. And that requires understanding what that historic volume is. So once we have it, is there an opportunity to go back? And I don't know what the right number of months are, but might be an opportunity there to get that distribution, to see if we actually have the right set, if you will. So
with Cynthia's suggestion of using our pre-existing problem types, we can actually go back quite a bit. The problem would be any problem types that didn't exist in the past. But I think we could use some of the historical, like, closed tickets where we can't modify them to get that data. And then we could use the current ones that are open once we make, set up the form or whatever, to kind of start doing the same thing with current ones. So we can basically say, this is the kind of volume we're looking at for the various categories. So I think we can do that. I think it would take a little bit of metricing, but there's enough of us on support that like metrics that we can get that done.
Make sure we capture that metricing verb.
Like, I'm kind of thinking of like doing a bake-off, because I think these are okay, but if anybody has an alternate suggestion, like, we could take a look at what we have now and see what coverage we have, what percent of the bucket of tickets goes into other, which would be a pretty good metric for, is this a good, reasonable set of problem types? But otherwise, like, if we just pulled like last 90 days of tickets, or 30 days, or some subset, somebody who had an idea of like, I think we should do it like this, could demonstrate, well, actually, with this system, we cover 90% of tickets, only 10% of it another. Is that kind of what you're imagining?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that if you think about it also in terms of distribution of tickets, and then take that to the next step of distribution of time that's necessary to resolve those types of tickets, right? Because we may end up with, say, 8 categories, 10% of them each in each of the 8 categories from that perspective. But then you got the 20-80 rule, sorry, 80-20 rule, whatever. It's, 5 of those categories take 3 times as much time to solve as the other 3 categories. So it's trying to get that balance, right? Not necessarily influence the categorization, but understand, if we distribute these, it's not going to be 8 distributed appropriately if you take a look at it from a skills-based routing or that type of thing, right? So it's quantity plus time.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense because, the sauce account tickets, there will be a good number of them, but they also require far less work than, say, a geo ticket. So I could see, once we kind of figure that out, being okay, now we got to figure out how to distribute the team amongst these, because if we just said evenly, we're going to have a bunch of people with tickets that take no time that are cleared out, and then we're going to have very few people for tickets that take a lot of time to work.
Yeah, and the flip of that coin is the amount of knowledge, training, et cetera, it takes to understand those tickets, right? So, and that's the thing, right? If you group three categories together, that this group is going to work these 3 categories, it just needs to balance out with, well, I need this skill set. It's not the 3 lowest categories. I just need these comparable skill sets that helps me solve the fast ones, helps me solve the long ones, but they're different than the one long one over here in geo, that type of thing. So
that makes sense to me, but anybody else kind of want to open that up just to make sure? Cool. Can we all agree that's kind of a good route to go on this?
I have not necessarily a counter proposal, but a way potentially that we could do it automated. Is if we took a look at tickets that included links to docs, could we use the area of the docs as an analog to the problem type? Or at least to suggest a problem area.
I think we could. My fear would be the other being kind of great from a lot of that. As an example, a lot of the sauce account tickets may have links to things that are only half related. Like with geo, a good example is like HA, where the links to Gitaly might lead us thinking this is a Gitaly, it's a Gitaly problem, Gitaly group, but it's not. It's all incorporated into HA. It's just a subcomponent of HA. But I think it would be worth kind of getting a list of all the links that were used and see if we can't derive some kind of categorization from that as well. And I see Jane's typing, so if Jane wants to verbalize.
No, I'm in agreement with where you're at. There's a thought going through my head that I don't want to lose, so I'm making note of it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think I like the idea, Lyle, and I think the one thing to consider is which side drives which side, right? So do we rely on docs, but we also influence, I think, docs based on what customers experience and the lack of docs. If that makes sense. And if I'm capturing your idea the right way, is our expectation to some extent is that customers will use the docs, find their answers, and then when they can't find it, they come to us, and then we need to associate those back to doc changes. That's a very simplified view of the world. I appreciate, and also don't know if that captured, which comes first, the chicken or the cart.
The thing that sort of I'm trying to maybe control for a little bit is I don't have a lot of confidence that each problem type associated to a ticket is an accurate representation of what the problem type in the ticket actually is. And so even as just sort of a checksum bit, if the problem type is HA and then we're linking to 2FA, we could at least say something isn't matching here.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I actually understood the checksum piece. That's interesting too.
And I could also like argue to Lyle's point of how often does support update the problem type once a ticket is submitted? So customer might have said, this is about CI/CD, and then we end up having to dive into problems with their runner that has nothing to do with their CI/CD, but we never updated the problem type. We might be miscategorizing. So I do think the docs angle is an interesting way to go, because the docs we're kind of providing are going to say, that's what we're really talking about in the ticket, regardless of what the ticket kind of started with. The only problem I could see is tickets where multiple problems come into one ticket. And as much as we say to separate those, that doesn't always happen. So I guess we could like multi-group that ticket and say, well, this is about 2FA, but it's also about HA, which, by the way, is doable in Zendesk. A drop-down field can have multiple fields. We've just never done it before. So there's nothing saying these categories have to be mutually exclusive. In theory, we could, when we set this up, make it where you can select multiple categories, because yes, this is an HA, but it's an HA using Geo. So which is it, HA or Geo? Well, it's both. So I do think it'd be important that whatever categories we use also need to be fluid of, well, it's not always going to be absolutely one. And I can tell you, like, when kind of in the mix of, is it this or this, I'd almost rather say put it as other, because it's neither, it's not one specific, it's both.
Yeah, I think
So
that'd be a good implementation aspect of it, to make sure that we can accommodate for the conditionals. But as a first kind of approach at it, let's understand what the top categories are. If we get to a point where we're setting those top categories, we set them up with the opportunity to drill down into conditionals that may overlap.
What I was thinking is we can get maybe the problem type, and then based on the docs, we can see, get the top problem types. But at the same time, if there is some doc that we can define as an outlier, then we can easily see the problem type was not correctly assigned. So we can just put those out of the count maybe. And by the way, I had a script that can do this, can take the docs and can group them based on the problem type already. So we could use that if we were going that route. I will just need to have to know the agreement that we have on how we want to present the data, and then I can build the data structure based on that.
So I like the way this is going. I think this is a good idea, is to use the problem types, but also the doc links that are being utilized in the ticket. I think using both of those will get us a good picture of, well, yeah, everybody says it's this problem, but they always link to all these issues. So we can probably drill down a little there and separate them out. So I think that's a good way to go. So I think what we would want to do is figure out the problem types, get our final problem type grouping, get those to Ronnie so he can use his script to use those plus the doc links to help find all the categories that we're looking at. Does that sound like a good route to proceed? Pursue? Sorry, not proceed, pursue.
What's our deliverable look like?
So the deliverable for this would be that we get our final draft of those problem types, get those to Ronnie, and then by our next meeting, I think Ronnie would be able to have like the data he's talking about, so we could see what that looks like. But I'm saying that tentatively, knowing next week is Christmas and the following week's New Year's. So we might have to like reschedule that meeting to, another week or something because of that. But do you think if we were by the end of like today or tomorrow able to give you that final draft, Ronnie, that would be enough time to kind of start building that data?
I don't see a problem there, because that's pretty much what the script does right now. So the only difference is that I will need to adjust a little bit of the ranking, but that's pretty much what it does at this moment. So it will not be a problem.
Okay, cool. So before we go into figuring out that draft and trying to work through that, Jane, if you want to kind of talk about this, because I've seen some emails about the skill matrix, but admittedly, it's been something I've kind of been like, okay, cool. I'm not going to look at it though.
Yeah, it's just I'm conscious that there is, particularly Tom and VG are working on building up the skills matrix for support engineering. And I'm just very aware that right now we're kind of working in isolation from each other in this work group and the work that they're doing. And actually, as Lyle says, I hope they'll be closely interlinked, but right now that would only be a happy accident. I just, think we need to make sure that we bring the two efforts together.
I'm actually thinking it might be a useful exercise for a bit longer, keep them separate and allow them to, come together and compare notes, right? So what are the skills capabilities that they see that are, I assume, congruent to solving problems? And how are we seeing tickets overlap with docs and the categories, right? And can that skills map to what we would potentially distribute tickets to, right? And again, coming back to the skills-based routing, do we attack it like, okay, here's our product types, here's kind of the sub-product types, or potentially just here's the docs that are associated to the problem types, that's that. Do we want to go and say, okay, well, let's go and fix, or let's go and train based on that mixture, right? Versus what's coming out of this skills matrix? Is it an evaluation of existing skills, or is it actually also comparing to where they see tickets and what needs to be trained towards in that grouping? If it's the latter, then yeah, I think we need to figure out how to get them closer together. If it's just trying to identify where do people see their interests and their current skills and that aspect of it, then I think we can eventually map them and say, okay, well, how far off are we, right? From building teams that can be skills-based routed, for example. And I just keep using that example because it's a simple sort of thing that doesn't necessarily be skills-based routing. That makes sense. An
interesting kind of thought experiment. Like, I do think it'd be interesting to see if the work they're doing and what we're doing, in theory, like Lyle said, they should be closely interlinked. But it would be interesting to see if they're not, why are they not closely interlinked? Why is what they see as the way to solve a ticket different than the categories we're seeing tickets come in as?
So I think a lot of their categorization, not exclusively, but a large chunk of it is also from our training modules. So there's a lot of thought going into what our training pathways and training modules are, in the consideration of the skills matrix or a component thereof. So it's, again, all these things to me should be well interlinked. Training, problem types, skills matrix. Yeah.
And I know like one thing me and Tom Atkins have talked about in the past is every time someone tries to do this, we try to link it to our modules, following the flaw of, oh, well, these are our categories. No, those are our category. Those are modules made as of right now. And they're modules that have been sporadically made. They're not all encompassing. So if like you're saying they're using the modules as their basis, I think they're going to miss several areas because of that. Because like the last time I tried to do an onboarding revamp, I tried to do the same thing, and Lyle came behind me and went, hey, so here's everything about GitLab.com that literally you've missed because of that. So I think that it'll be interesting to see what they come up with and what we come up with, and see how closely interlinked they are, or see if they're different.
Yeah, the path the skills matrix has taken has surprised me because it's quite different to what I've seen used before. So I'm kind of still watching that evolve as well. Yeah.
But I definitely do think it's a good idea for us to keep an eye on it, just to kind of see how it's progressing and how closely it is linking to our little project here.
That's another note. I appreciate what you just said, ta, because it's been a while since I've been in Australia and I've heard that.
I didn't even realize I'd said it, actually. It's not a word I normally use.
Tucker and all of that. Yeah, it's the various local terms. Ta. I like.
I don't think I've ever actually heard that said, so that was cool.
It's short for Texas version of thanks, y'all.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I heard somebody the other day say thanks you all, and it broke my brain. I was just like, what? Hold on, what? They're like, what? And I'm like, what? I like, how? Why? And like, this wasn't somebody from another region. It was like my neighbor said it, and I was like, what? No, you were born here. What are you doing?
The Android.
Dude, it broke my brain. I had no idea. Like, yeah, I was like straight up like, okay, alien, like this is what is that? That old 80s horror
Oh, it's like
movie?
Data from Star Trek Next Generation. He couldn't use contractions. Nope, no Trekkies. Okay, that's fine.
That y'all's a contraction.
I derailed the entire meeting. Sorry.
No, that's all good. All right, so looking at the kind of draft that we have towards the bottom of the doc, it seems like there's still a good bit missing. I know one new thing we added was the support for GitLab runners. That came from that lovely emergency. What was that? Last week, Lyle? This week? Time has blended together. Last week, yeah. That came from a .com emergency last week that had nothing to do with .com. It was about their runners. But it was enough of a problem as I started looking at tickets going, runner questions actually should probably be kind of their own thing. Just because it is a different component of GitLab, and very rarely does troubleshooting on the runners have almost anything to do with GitLab itself. But I'm noticing that there's still some problem types we haven't kind of categorized, and it looks like it's because a lot of them start entering only one realm of it, like installation help is almost exclusively self-managed. Upgrades, migrations, backups, self-managed. Lyle.
Installation help, like we could generalize it to setup. There's a lot of customers on .com that have like setup questions. So getting started with GitLab.
Yeah, kind of. So I like that. Like the configuration help where it's like the GitLab RB and pages and admin panel. I feel like that's also kind of part of like installation help, getting started. Like I feel like it's just a continuation of it. But curious if y'all feel the same way. Like, do you feel like that's its own category, or do you feel like that needs to be kind of generalized into something else? Lyle's doing the dance of thinking.
It's kind of, it's like not set up. I'm just thinking like GitLab RB, pages, admin panel stuff is all kind of like after you're already set up and you're extending your use of GitLab. So what do we call that? Where it's like I want to add an LDAP server. Yeah, working with GitLab.
Working with GitLab, and we can cover pretty much all of them.
I mean,
configuration, upgrade. No, I mean like those.
So one problem type. I'm having a problem with GitLab.
Well, no, I mean like I see what he's saying. Like upgrades, migrations, backups, configuration. It all kind of goes into the same like being a sysadmin for a self-managed instance. Like, man, there used to be a term for that. It's not DevOps, SysOps. It's basically SysOps.
So like global configuration help, because there's other configuration help you might want. Like I'm thinking a GitLab.com administrator who's trying to configure something in a project or in a group, where we're not looking at a global configuration, we're looking at like a group level configuration, whereas this is like very much tied to sysadmin admin stuff.
Could we use the term system configuration help,
or instance
configuration help? Because I feel like that it's still going to be separated from from sauce from .com, but I feel like in corporate, like I don't know. I kind of also agree with Ronnie's thought that upgrades, backups, migrations all kind of fall under the same thing as configuration help. It's maintenance.
Managing GitLab, something like that.
Yeah, like GitLab instance management.
There you go.
Okay, cool. So Cynthia's question about the monitoring stuff was that we have application level monitoring for like clusters. So we're not sure if we wanted to make this monitoring of an instance, like, because we specifically list logging, Prometheus, Grafana, tracing, and those are all kind of very much self-managed. So I'm wondering if Prometheus, Grafana, logging would all kind of go under instance management.
Yes. I think that's kind of makes me wonder if there's like another, like,
I mean, honestly, like the kind of monitoring Cynthia's talking about, isn't that exclusively Kubernetes?
it is, but it, yeah. I mean,
So I wonder if that's like the same kind of question as like Geo and HA of, it's very much like what she's talking about. The difference is Kubernetes versus Prometheus. And while Kubernetes can have Prometheus, I think when she talks about like application versus instance, we're talking right now. I think the only application monitoring we have is via Kubernetes, right, Lyle, on .com?
Mostly true. There's some newer features that are coming out related to incident management, where you can configure other monitoring tools, which is probably an entirely different category. This product's too big. But I mean, what about changing that to like sort of group project management, where it's still sort of a meta category, where it's like I want to do a thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's no, we're gonna wait. Do we want to? No, SAML I think is under authentication. Yeah, so we'll keep that separate. Although group SAML would be, we get too meta with it, it's gonna get bad. All right, so I agree with Cynthia's point on 4 about project management. Is we're basically listing a ton of features under project management. So do we need to separate that, or do we want to kind of keep that as a big net and then we can drill through it later?
I mean, that's maybe the divide that I feel like we're heading towards, is like we have these sort of management categories where it's like getting started, getting set up, and maintaining. And then we have like, I'm having a problem using GitLab kind of problems.
So yeah, I think what you're kind of talking about is instance management, group project management, and then, for lack of better terms, GitLab errors, feature problems. Like I'm not the creative one on naming. Y'all got to help me out on this one. Otherwise, we'll get categories named A, B, C, and D.
As long as, if they can click a button in the interface and it says open a ticket with problem type A74, and we know that means, that works too.
We're all going to get back to the old Windows where you have to have a giant manual on your thing to be like, oh, problem type 760CX2. Oh, that means a typo.
I had that just the other day, like on, I don't remember what it was. I think it was actually on my Mac. It's not gone. Those days are not gone.
You know me wrong. I do miss the days where when somebody was like, I have this error code, I could go and Google it and be like, it means you need a new motherboard. I do miss those days. It was really easy. There's probably like that time period before Google existed where that wasn't as fun to do.
So maybe we have the instance management and the group management. So we could have probably account management, and account management will be for like all the plan things, changes in plan, everything related to the account. So what I'm thinking is try to go from the biggest to the smallest point, the instance, the group, and then the account, and try to put the problems.
Yeah,
you,
account means more like 2FA or like billing, like
yeah, like billing problems will be in account, or like problems like the password problems, 2FA problems will be account problems. But then we have the group problems, which will be like SAML configuration will be more a group problem, or something that affects several accounts. And if it affects everything you have, then it will be an instance problem.
I do see like a benefit of starting with wider nets on this and then drilling down further as we go.
Mm-hmm.
It does make categorization a little easier.
I think one thing I keep thinking is it sounds like we get caught up in which direction we're coming from, right? We're coming from a direction of customers trying to do something in the system and they have a problem. At what point are they going to associate with contacting support? It's not at what point are they going to associate going and looking for help on docs or everything else. It's like, I can't find my answer. How do I categorize it? They're probably not going to go back up to, well, I'm in an account management situation, or I'm in a installation management, or whatever the various top levels are. They're going to come at it like, I'm having this type of problem. There's also the element that we've talked about of categorizing tickets we've already dealt with, and which is at a very much more granular level, right? Because we've come to the solution, we've tried to categorize it, whether or not that categorization is correct or not. So now we're trying to meet those together, and not, in my view, not in a how do you group documentation so that the customer can find the right thing. It's how do you get the customer to the right group of people that have the right skill set for the type of thing they're encountering at the time, right? So there's this, we categorize at the end. We want to show the customer the right things at the beginning. And then by the time they can't find their answer, we want to get them to the right person, right? And what we're trying to figure out is, what is that right grouping of people? So do we look at how customers are going to look at it? Do we look at how we've solved problems in the past and have those groups of people? I think that's the right way, right? It's looking at historically, how do we solve problems? How do those group up? And then, you know, these top level things that we talk about might be good as we categorize and group doc searches, or, you know, online helps, or, you know, that type of thing. But okay, my phone's going off the grid. Let me just silence this. All right. So yeah, that's how we kind of get in this recursive discussion, cyclical discussion, et cetera. That which way are we coming at this? Let's decide a way, work that way, and then make the two meet eventually.
Yeah, like I kind of agree of like, when the customer comes to us, they're not going to be like, it's an instant management problem. They're going to come to us with, it's about configuration. It's about my monitoring. It's about, I need to do an upgrade. Like, they're not going to come and say it's instance management and expect us to know, oh yeah, this is about this or this or this. So I do think we do need to kind of, like, going the bigger net route makes it easier to categorize tickets, but it doesn't make it easier to get it to where we're helping the customers with this information.
Yeah, and I think you loop back to that bigger category group once you identify, you know, what are those groupings, and then we can say, okay, well, now we've got these bigger groups that we can go and, you know, focus different attention to, or whether it's, you know, this group needs more documentation, or this group needs more, this grouping needs more user I don't know what the heck it is, user steps or whatever, but.
I think that makes sense. So in that vein, I think we can maybe simplify this. Instance management, I would agree, has licensing issues. Group project management, I would say, is subscription issues, because that's where we're going to encounter the subscriptions are applied on group namespaces or personal namespaces. Honestly, I think keeping project management like as it is kind of works. Get rid of that. Get rid of these. I think keeping it as it is, I think we are going to have to separate it out like Cynthia's saying, but I do think keeping it as the broader thing that we're kind of talking about, and then we can separate it out, makes sense. The free problem types are kind of going to be in a weird situation. I think our like game plan is to slowly whittle out those kind of problems, because we want to kind of get rid of free users submitting problems anyway. So do you think it's worth just focusing on paid customer problems for now, or should we just make like a category that's free customer and we can kind of go beyond that later?
Yes.
All right, cool. So let's free customer problems, and that can incorporate. I don't know what I just did, but now the formatting's all broke. There we go. There we go. And that can incorporate those issues, epics, boards, milestones, and roadmaps. I think just put that under project management, right? Source code management. Yeah, see, I think this is why Cynthia was pointing out that project management is going to get where everything kind of fits into it. That's all right. We have a bunch of subgroups. Runners and executors. We just went ahead and said GitLab runners is its own category, so we can get that. I would say secure is its own category, and that'll incorporate the DOS, SOS, license management, and all that other fun stuff. If I say something y'all disagree with, just say something. I'm just trying to categorize these so we can move to next stages. Third-party integrations, where would y'all classify that as?
Group project management.
That poor category.
No, not that one. I want to build it.
You said project management.
I said
it's probably because we have two called project management that got confused.
Fix board.
So is this group management and then project management, or is it group/project and we need to call the number 4 something else?
Call the number 4 something else. Because like
there we go. A misspelled untitled. There you go. So we'll come back to giving that a title, but for right now, we'll just call it untitled group. And we already tackled this. So that brings us to, we already covered Omnibus. So then it comes to these lovely categories that we need to talk about, which is HA, Kubernetes, and Geo. And my thought is that's its own category that we called like scaled architecture or scaling.
Is it? It depends, because it could be installation help. I want to install GitLab Helm and I'm having a problem. It could be performance. I have GitLab Helm installed and I'm having a problem with performance. It could also be I have no idea what I'm doing, as is often the case.
I have 5 users and I'm installing Kubernetes for some stupid reason. Yes. So should we not categorize those for right now and say they'll fall into these other categories based on the criteria?
I mean, go ahead, Ron.
I was going to say that I believe that we should categorize them differently, because it will make it easier when we need to put the right resources on them. And just because those resources are more specific than others.
And Tom did talk about the whole time to train for these resolutions, and these are the areas where it's like, this is the most intensive to train somebody to solve a ticket. Even if it is, I'm trying to install Geo. To help out with that, you probably need to have installed Geo, which is not a short process.
Is that a factor of the newness? I was trying to think of a different word, but newness of the technology and innovation and implementation within GitLab, and over time, it won't be as time consumptive for knowledge or working through. I'm trying to differentiate between things we introduce that take a lot of time, training and knowledge and stuff, and then once everybody seems to have gotten it, it's like, now we've simplified all of how we do installs and how it runs and everything else, so we just kind of move.
So with Kubernetes, I could say it's a matter of once we all get to where we're comfortable with it, it's easy and it'll be quick. With HA and Geo, even if you are an expert on it, just asking for logs is difficult, because which logs, which files, which nodes, it gets complicated. So even if like they provide all logs, that's still probably like 20 different files you're going to have to review. It's a lot comparatively to almost all these other issues. So I would say they would take more time and effort to resolve, solely because it's not a simple setup, it's a massive setup.
Okay, and so each of these additional categories could have like new technologies introduced, rather than having a new technologies category, right? Yeah. So you're going to introduce new technologies in instance management. You're going to introduce new technologies in group and project management, that type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then there's these other things about just managing a high availability environment, right? A scalable environment, however you want to phrase it. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So that's kind of why I'm thinking scaled architecture is like its own thing. Of, it's not because it's a new technology, it's because it's just a monster of a task.
Can I offer a point of resistance?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that we've gotten caught in this trap before. I think the problem types are separate, but related to distribution and architecture. But distribution and architecture, like, there are uniquenesses, yes, but they're not problem types by themselves. Like, if I am having trouble getting set up, I'm having an installation problem. The architecture and the distribution that I'm using are important, because installing on Kubernetes is different than getting set up on GitLab.com, is different than setting up Geo. But the problem type is still the problem type. So to me, it does kind of confuse routing a little bit, because what it does is, I think that we do need to have experts in those areas, but then you don't necessarily need to be an expert in every single distribution to help with many setup problems. So I'm talking myself out of what I'm saying, but I think I'm still holding it.
No, you're still holding it. And as you said it, I immediately heard myself yelling at people. It's still GitLab. Stop pretending Kubernetes is different. So you just threw my own Kubernetes argument back at me.
But
and while I'm upset, I'm also very proud of you for doing so. So I do think, in that vein, we should not make a category for Geo HA, because they should fall into other ones. In theory, our categorization, just because it's an HA ticket, does not mean you need to know everything about HA. You just need to know about that problem. If it's Sidekick, then you just need to know about Sidekick. Sidekick on HA is Sidekick on omnibuses, Sidekick on Kubernetes. So I think maybe let them fall within the other categories.
I think it's a field on almost every form. Like, I'm having a problem with which distribution are you using? GitLab SaaS or GitLab self-managed? What architecture are you using?
Yeah,
HA,
pretty much every form, or the self-managed and the partner forms currently all have that on them.
And
is they ask your installation and your version. In the sandbox, they even ask for the runner version now if you say it's a runner problem. So I do think it's a subcategory, but it means it doesn't need to be its own category. So I agree with you on that. Cool. So I think some of these ones we've got down in this table, I mean, number 8 is always going to be the same. Other. I hate the category, but it's always going to exist. And like, even when we get it down to like 1 or 2 tickets, it's still going to exist. So now we get to the ones that, no, we still have more missing ones. So analytics groups, code analytics, value stream management. I don't even know what those words are. Lyle, do you know what those words are?
I feel like code analytics can fit in wherever we put secure. Value stream management. That's like so CIO or CTO that like kind of feels like group project management, honestly.
I'm going to have to go look up what that even is later.
It's like, if you click on the analytics in any group, you can see like the number of merge requests that have been submitted by any individual. You can see how fast things are closing. It's all of those graphs.
Right. Oh, is that what that's all called?
Yeah.
Oh, well, now I know. I just called them graphs. I thought that was its own category. All right. Code quality, code testing, and coverage. That's going to go under CI/CD. Container registry and package registry. Is that also under CI/CD?
I think so.
Like, those things don't have to be part of CI/CD, technically speaking.
They usually are.
They usually are, but I can make a container registry in GitLab and have nothing to do with CI/CD.
We call it
Case in
CI/CD.
point, the replication stuff. You could call it runner CI/CD and packages. Because, I mean, you're right, they normally go hand in hand, but cool, we've knocked out even more missing problems. Okay, so now we've got these ones that are already on the table. Some of these we can remove because we've taken care of them. Other runners, security incident is going to go under instance management. That'd be like GitLab security, GitLab.com security incidents.
Yeah. I think the
Although
it's only that thing?
Yes, security incident specifically. This is about like when like the security team sends out a notice of like, we noticed this patch, please reset your passwords. I guess they could, in theory, occur to self-managed as well, but I don't think we've ever really seen one. If you remember how we talked about a specialized form that doesn't actually show Lyle, that's what those are.
I think it should just be something.
All right. Yeah, let's make it.
Are we going to show them?
I mean, it would, yeah, I'd say security incident. That's what it says right now is security incident, I think. I'd argue CI minutes would go under sauce account problems.
I mean,
or
we could take, like, we have licensing and subscriptions and different things, but we could just have issue with GitLab purchasing. Or,
cool, we can do that. So this can go under that. Nope. That, licensing, subscription. Typed that word like 100 times over the past week and I just couldn't type it. Importing and exporting projects and groups. Well, that one pretty easily goes under group management. All right, so we got authentication and authorization. Where would that one go? That's like SAML, 2FA, LDAP.
Instead of getting started, maybe, or group and project management. But
yeah, that one kind of would apply. Like, it depends. If they're using .com, it's going to be group and project management. But if they're using self-managed, it's instance management because it's going to be about configuration. You could put it under both.
I think it's more group because in the end it's all about the group, no?
I mean, if it's LDAP, then it's not.
Yeah, if it's LDAP, it's not group related at all. That's the problem. Is this covers LDAP and SAML and Okta and all this other stuff, which, depending on your platform, is group or is instance. Would it be worth separating instead of just putting SAML, LDAP, and all that under authentication, separating them out and saying LDAP is instance, but SAML and Okta is group and project?
I'm just thinking in my mind, kind of what Tom Cooney was saying is like, as a person coming to this form, like, I have a problem. I don't want to find the right category.
Yeah.
So even if we're 100% logically consistent, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily clear.
So it sounds like because of that, we should just do like this. Make it its own category and we can drill down on it later.
That will also help route tickets, because that class of problems is all fairly related. And
all right, cool. And then we already agreed that sauce is going to be its own thing. Sauce account problems will be their own thing. If I can type correctly, apparently. Yes, that's fine. Cool. So I think what we've got here is our 12 categories. But do these sound good to everybody? I think these are our high-level categories, and then what we're seeing on the sub-points are what the customer would be selecting as their problem.
But I think it's a very excellent start about the general categories. We can figure out what needs to look like as it doesn't too intimidate the customer, depending on what they see. But yeah, it looks good.
I don't like that somehow we've broken everything. So let's figure this out. Hold on, Lyle, I'm fixing it, I promise. No, what happened? There we go. Ah, there we go. Now it's fixed. You'd be surprised how much of my job is fighting Google Docs for formatting.
Do we want to name number 4?
Oh, yeah, we should probably name you number 4. Lyle said using GitLab. That sounds fine with me. Although I do like the idea of a group named Untitled.
The way that I'm framing it in my mind is the form says, I'm having a problem with, instead of getting started, I'm having a problem with using GitLab. I'm having a problem with purchasing, billing, finance. I'm having a problem with authenticating. Maybe tweak, say.
I think that works. Does anybody disagree with calling it using GitLab?
My fear with that is that the customers who like to only give us 10 words of description are going to go, yeah, of course, my problem's with using GitLab. That's why I'm logging a ticket. It's possibly a little bit too generic.
Using GitLab feature,
I was wondering if it was features. Yeah.
GitLab features.
using?
I mean, using or just GitLab features, I think either one kind of works, but
Yeah, because it could include enabling, configuring, yeah, not just I've got it working, but I've got problems with the way it's working. Yeah.
oh, we can get rid of this note about this zone category because it already is.
How feasible would it be for us to go through some tickets and compare how the customers have self-reported them, what keywords they've used in their description, and then what we've finally landed on for our problem types over, a recent period, just to kind of understand how the customers' brains are working.
So I don't think it'd be difficult, but we are just about at time. So I think that's a good homework, is for everybody to pick 10 random tickets and see if they fit into a category nice and neat.
Well, can we use the same data set? Like, can we just pull, like, send us a spreadsheet with a list, like it's like to the ticket,
Yes.
the title of the ticket, and then we can each make a copy of the spreadsheet, go through however many? Because if we don't all come up with the same categories, that's going to be a problem.
Right. Okay, so
Oh.
I will.
Or it indicates that something's not clear.
I will, by end of week, make a spreadsheet with 5 sauce and 5 self-managed, or whatever, 10 random tickets. I'm not even going to tell you what they are. I'll pull 10 random tickets, and the spreadsheet will have the ticket ID and then a drop down for what you think the category is. And then I will disseminate that to y'all with instructions to make a copy of the spreadsheet and then go through and categorize each one. Now, do we want to do the high level categories or these kind of weird subcategories we just kind of typed off the top of our head?
I think we can start with the top level, but wouldn't a survey will be easier because we just go and select the one and we don't need to make copies of.
Actually, that's a good thought. If we do it like a survey, we could actually, and it's only 10 tickets, we could send it out to the whole team. And if we get, 15 responses, we have.
Make a survey with 10 random tickets. Yes, Tom. I saw him waving. Is he waving goodbye? Sorry, I was typing notes.
Yes, I'm waving goodbye. Gotta run to one on with Eric. Cheers.
Cool. But yeah,
Have a good weekend.
I will make you too. I'll make a survey with 10 random tickets and send it out to support team at. I will do that by end of week, and then I will compile all the results. And hopefully we see a large amount of agreement between those who fill out the form. I'm hoping at least the 4 of us fill out that survey.
I suggest we don't send it forcefully, but just put it in support we can review. Like, I want people who are interested to do it, and I don't want to send inbox harassment where they feel like they have to. At this point, when we have it a little bit more refined, then
okay. So yeah, I will make the survey with 10 random tickets with all the categories, and I will put it in the support we can review and communicate into the team chat. Then I will compile the results before our next meeting and kind of see where we go from there. Ronnie, do these categories let you kind of use your script thing to do what you were talking about?
I think it will. I will start working on it, and if we reach any concern, I will bring it back.
All right, cool. I think that's a good place for us to do this. Well, I appreciate everybody's meetings. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thanks all. Have a great one.